protests for Donald Trump are muted as expected. But that's not the big news about the Trump arrest, because the biggest news that we have here is that the SPLC has designated a brand new racist dog whistle that they can use to pound out everybody that they don't like and make sure that you don't support anybody that they don't like for saying these kinds of things. And we will reveal what that is, which it says in the title anyway, right after we get done with finance. So we'll be talking about that and reading from the USA Today to go over what happened there. In other news, Donald Trump as well has demanded National Archives records to expose the fact that he was treated unfairly. Now, usually unfair in a political context means you're losing the argument, but it is something that we should look at and see what is going on with that. The FDIC is seeking to break up SVB and seeks a separate sale of private units, so we'll be talking just a bit about what's happening there and what is going on with that. And the U.S., in the midst of all of our banking crisis and all the money, is seeking to send more Patriot missiles to the Ukraine, and at a much faster pace. It is going to be all this and more. I was the one flying the balloons. I am Jay Edgar, and this is Contemporary. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Contemporary. My name is Jay Edgar, and we have got your evening news here today over on Contemporary. We've got a lot to talk about here. Not as much about the Trump arrest as, especially last night, as where that took up pretty much the whole show. Because, well, let's face it, it didn't happen. We got a lot of people out there. We got a lot of people angry and upset and wondering whether or not they were going to get out to protest, or whether or not we were going to see another January 6th style attack or setup, or whatever else it was that people were putting out there. But the most important thing out of this is the fact that we have a new racist dog whistle. That's right, the SPLC has denoted a new way for people to say that I am a racist, and we will be going over that here today on Contemporary. Before we get started, make sure you guys go check out great programming such as The Daily Ignoramus, The Breakdown with Bergenhoff, The R-Rated Conservative, The Porch Boys. Go check out Tweets by Brit, Mr. Behavior, The No Gimmicks Podcast, and more, as we seek to bring you a better news experience. That is right, from the common man for the common man. Go check out all that great content as we look at this, and you can see news, culture, music, religion, and a host of other things over with those great creators. And let's get down into the news of the day, because I do want to finish out the stack today if we possibly can. So let's get started with the finance. Oddly enough, looking at the Dow, we have more good news coming off of that. So a couple of flukes with the SVB drop, but now it's looking like, hey, now we're going to start climbing again. We will see what's happening with that. The Dow up 316.02, which was a kind of a smiley face chart on the day. It wound up being up a full percent, just shy of a full percent rather, to 32,560.60 after spiking up and then dropping off throughout the day and climbing back up. So we'll see what's happening with that in the futures in just a moment. On the Bitcoin, another day of wins for the Bitcoin if you are holding on to that. Bitcoin being up to $28,138 US and 40 US cents. That is up 313.3 US dollars, or 1.13%. So it's coming back into a steady climb. As far as what's going to happen with this as we go into the remainder of the Biden admin, I don't know. I don't have a crystal ball, but it looks like people are looking to get their money out of US banking, so we will see what happens with that. The gas prices around the Madison area remain mostly steady, with the 316s and 318s starting to creep back up to their 330 mark, with the exception of the Quick Trip on the far east side, which remains at 316. So it looks like there may be a run on gas coming up here in the near future. Check your local pricing to see if it looks like it might be time to go top off that tank before the prices rise up out of control. Let's grab one from IBD. Dow Futures market runs into federal decisions. GME skyrockets late. Free Republic tumbles with an advertisement that we are going to say no thank you to from Ed Carson. Dow Futures fell slightly after hours along with the S&P, and the NASDAQ Futures. Nike and GameStop reported that after the close, investors are already turning to Wednesday's Federal Reserve rate hike decision. The market rally saw strong gains on Tuesday as Janet Yellen signaled more support for banks. First Republic Bank led a rebound Tuesday, but FRC stock fell sharply overnight as the California-based bank struggles to find a path forward. Swift Athletic Shoemaker on holding. EV chip play, Air, Test Systems, and Google parent Alphabet offered buying opportunities on news. Anon gapped on earnings, Air rallied on new orders, and Google cleared a key level on its AI chatbot. Tesla stock made a bullish move Tuesday within an emerging bottoming base as Tesla China sales continue to pick up and Moody's upgraded its credit rating. On the futures, Dow Futures fell 0.1 versus fair value, with Nike stock acting as a drag. The S&P edged lower and the NASDAQ dipped 0.1. And remember, overnight action in Dow Futures and elsewhere doesn't necessarily translate into actual trading in the next regular stock market session. On the Fed. The Fed meeting announced it's due at 2 p.m. Wednesday. The odds of a quarter-point rate hike rose to 87% on Tuesday because the stocks are clawing back and people are starting to have confidence in the bank again, and they just can't put enough people out of work with the current rate that they're going with. So we will see what happens with that. Along with the Fed rate decision, the central bank will release interest rate hike guidance and economic projections. Fed Chief Jerome Powell will speak at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Time. His comments about inflation risks, the economy, and the banking crisis will all be key, so we will see what happens with that. But who is not waiting to see what the Fed says? Amazon is set to lay off another 9,000 workers in addition to earlier cuts. Yeah, that unemployment sure is at a record low, but hey, we keep seeing thousands at a time getting laid off. From Annie Palmer. Amazon will lay off 9,000 more employees in the coming weeks, CEO Andy Jassy said in a memo to staff on Monday. The cuts are on top of the previously announced layoffs that began in November and extended into January. That round totaled more than 18,000 and primarily affects staffers in its retail devices, recruiting, and human resources groups. Amazon made the decision to lay off more as it looks to streamline costs. It took into account the economy, as well as the uncertainty that exists in the near future. Jassy said the company wrapped up the second phase of its annual budgeting process, referred to internally as OP2. The overriding tenet of our annual planning this year was to be leaner while doing so in a way that enables us to still invest robustly in the key long-term customer experience, all that we believe can be meaningfully improve customers' lives and Amazon as the whole, Jassy said. The latest round will primarily impact Amazon's cloud computing, human resources, advertising, and Twitch live streaming businesses. Which, by the way, you should really join me over on Twitch. You really should. It is one of my favorite platforms, and they are actually paying me. So if you want to help support your favorite creator, or at least the one that you tolerate for your evening news, because what they say on the TV blows, join me on Twitch, twitch.tv/jedgar102. Drop me your free Amazon Prime. So that's $2.50 in my pocket every time you guys do that, by the way. And go check that out. Let's get into the main news of the day, what you all came here for. We've got one tweet to tell you what happened today, and then we will go into our newest dog whistle. Shannon Joy tweets out, "Good morning, happy Tuesday. There will be no Trump arrest. Classic Trump unibrow scam. Security and press outnumbering protesters by like 10 to 1 in Manhattan this morning. Meaning, y'all didn't buy the scam, well done, America." And, well, we're going to talk about that, especially coming out of the USA Today, which is going to go further into this. So, despite Trump's calls for protests, few efforts emerge as supporters worry. It's a trap, from Will Carlos. And yes, by the way, the SPLC is getting in on this one. Protest, we must take our nation back. We must save America. Protest, protest, protest. So into two posts from former President Trump, who has been posting incessantly, often in all caps, on his Truth Social page for the last few days. The messages have been flowing ever since Trump announced on Saturday that he believes he will be arrested in New York on Tuesday. But while the former president calls on his supporters to gather and protest as persecution, that message seems to be falling on deaf, or at least unwilling ears, and that's going to be the important part, the unwilling part. 3 days after Trump's desperate pleas, online support for public protest remains unfocused, disorganized, and muted, according to experts who monitor far-right extremists online. It's me, I'm far-right extremists. Rather than organizing protests, prominent Trump supporters online are instead driving a different narrative, that any public events are a trap set by law enforcement and that attending any events will be counterproductive and likely result in protesters being arrested. That reaction fits a pattern experts say broadly extremist moments are often whipsawed with aggressive activity, followed by pushback from law enforcement resulting in withdrawal as remaining followers grow paranoid. The January 6th selfie fest at the Capitol, which was preceded by a call to action at the Trump rally. No, it was not. That is a lie. That is a bold-faced lie. Has led to nearly 1,000 persecutions. That offers even the most ardent supporter tangible evidence that pro-Trump fervor can lead to jail time, even as some conspiracy theorists continue to claim that those January 6th rioters were somehow framed. No, they weren't framed. And there is a lot of this, what this article is going into, goes into both the editorializing and the fact that they are pushing this to be the next racist dog whistle. The next indication that you're just like Charlottesville, that you're just like a Trump Nazi, that you're just like everything else. The people that were arrested on January 6th were absolutely not framed. They did the crime. They were set up. But they were not framed. They were there. They went into the building. Many of them were not planning on going to the building. Many of them were planning on gathering on the streets. They were planning on gathering on the park and showing such a show of force and show of unity for the former president that Congress couldn't ignore it. But then we had certain people with crisp, brand new MAGA hats, wearing flags over their shoulders that sometimes still had the creases in them, coming up to people and whispering into their ears, "We have to go into the Capitol. That's the only way they're going to know how we feel. We have to go into the Capitol. Come on, we have to go into the Capitol tonight." These people, of course, not going into the Capitol, but the people whose ears they were whispering into, conveniently disappearing and going back to their hotel rooms, sometimes being right up on the front lines. Ray-ups. Right on the front lines, watching the gate get knocked over before being rushed off to safety by a handler or somebody else within the crowd who was doing off the same thing. No, they weren't framed. They were set up. And by the way, what we saw out here, and we'll be talking a bit about that, was the same thing. And everybody knows it. Even the people who are people are now trying to cope and say, "Hey, Donald Trump doesn't have any support right now. Look at how small these crowds are in front of Trump Tower saying Trump won." We'll be touching on that in just a bit here. Even those people knew that this was a setup. They were looking to either get Trump supporters killed or forced to sit in front of Alvin Bragg as the DA while they get persecuted for the crime of supporting Trump. And unlike January 6 details on this latest rallying cry are scant, with no known time and place for a Trump arrest and the possibility that he won't even be arrested, that his call to action is some kind of ruse. There remains no central target for his supporters this time around. No, there was a central target. I've seen the tweets get deleted in a hurry, but I saw plenty of people come out and say, "We're going to go to the DA's office and we're going to show him that we're in solidarity." Every patriot must be at the DA's office. To which I said, no. But now we get some of our experts and dog whistles here. We're seeing folks cautioning people about engaging in protests out of fear that it's a trap by the government, said Oren Segal, vice president of the Anti-Defamation League Center on Extremism. That's right. If you don't want people to go and protest and do domestic terrorism, now you're an extremist because you're being studied by the ADL's Center on Extremism. We're also seeing some people urging people to protest despite that risk. Yeah, those are called feds. With some calls for violence. Yeah, those are called feds. Those are called provocateurs. And that's called entrapment, by the way. But overall, there's no sort of cohesive movement in terms of where these protests should happen. In one pro-Trump channel on the encrypted messaging service Telegram devoted to the QAnon conspiracy theory, a monitor who was wearing a blue jacket with yellow lettering on it asked the channel's 12,000 subscribers whether they would protest if Trump were arrested Tuesday. Overwhelmingly, the comments in the response. Almost 2,000 of them were in the negative. There's no point in playing into their hands. The rioters will be paid bad actors, not Trump supporters. We know what's coming, wrote one user. Trump's social media site, Truth Social, British far-right provocateur Paul Joseph Wanson polled his 218,000 followers with a question. Is the potential protest against Trump being arrested a J6-style trap? Of the 1,580 responses, 85% voted yes. And on Twitter, Ali Alexander, one of the main pushers of the Stop the Steal movement, which claimed that the 2020 election was actually won by Trump. Honk honk, no. It was by Biden. Honk honk, don't ban me, Susan. Warned his more than 175,000 followers. And this is one of the things that I pointed out too. If you protest in New York City, you will be in the single most hostile jurisdiction in the United States. That's probably not true. I would say DC and LA lead in hostility towards conservatism. There is no law and order. You have no liberty or rights there. You will be jailed or worse. The notion that pro-Trump protests are traps laid by law enforcement has been around for years, said Megan Squire, Deputy Director for Data Analytics at the Southern Poverty Law Center. Another expert in why not going along with their narrative is actually the extremism. But in the last few days, that narrative has dominated online discussion about whether to come out in public and support Trump if he's arrested, she said. Squire, I can't believe this. This is just beyond to me. Oh my God. Squire said she started a research folder called It's a Trap. I am most likely in that folder, just so you know, where she is storing screenshot examples of this messaging she finds online. The sense of paranoia among these Trump supporters echoes the concerns felt by white supremacists in the months after the deadly Charlottesville rally in 2017. Squire said, online people are being extremely cautious about what they say and what they plan, she said. Well, gee, I wonder why we would think, by the way, not a Trump supporter here, but a person who understands and has enough distrust of the government to know not to walk into the government and tell them how I feel about them onto their own buildings. Why? Oh, why would I think that it's a trap? Let's see. The big one is the January 6th rally, which I saw through from the moment that I heard about it. If you go to the Capitol, you will be arrested. And I actually thought that there was going to be more bloodshed. I really did. I thought for sure that this was going to be a sniper fish in a barrel fest, with National Guard screaming insurrection, just like they actually did. and taking pot shots, taking out as many as they could. I am pleasantly surprised that that's not what happened. The arrest and try Governor Whitmer shamble that they did in Michigan to take them over to Wisconsin, where there were 13 people involved, and 8 of them were federal agents. Gee, why wouldn't I think that something pro-Trump is a trap? Do you guys even remember? And this is, by the way, where we got the OnlyFeds meme. The Justice for January 6th rally, they didn't talk about it very much afterwards because it failed. Where everybody came out and said that if you go to this rally, there's going to be somebody out there who is whispering in your ear, come on, throw the brick. It's going to be fine. You'll be protected. Donald Trump will come out and protect you. Just throw the brick. And nobody showed up for it except for obvious feds. You know, again, what we got the OnlyFeds meme for. Let me see if I can find that to remind you. I gotta go see if I can actually find the other one. Yeah, that one, right there. This totally organic set of guys at the Justice for J6 rally. Gun. 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 Fresh buzz cut. Identical Ray-Bans. They get in trouble, they get looked at, they get scrutinized, they get horrible media attention, a lot of legal attention, and then they say the same thing that pops into their head, which is retreat. Go back to your mom's basement and don't come out, because of course anybody who doesn't go on with the progressive line has to be a loser in his mom's basement. These fucking people. Complicating the efforts of any Trump supporters who do wish to protest in support of him is a lack of any central focus for their movement. Are you stupid? We know what the central focus was supposed to be, and we'll see the setup for this a little bit later. It was supposed to be the Manhattan DA's office. That's why there are gates and sandbags and federal agents in front of Alvin Bragg's office right now. On January 6, 2021, the tens of thousands of Trump supporters who traveled to D.C. had a clear target, the U.S. Capitol, where the 2020 election results were being certified. The latest call to action lacks the same clear goal this time around. It's unclear whether to envision a protest attempting to stop the work of the investigators in New York, prevent an arrest in Trump's home in Florida, or take action somewhere else. By Monday evening, protests had been announced for locations ranging from a parking lot of an In-N-Out in Orange County, yeah, that was a trap, to a location to be defined in New York City. But none of these events appear to be attracting enough attention to draw large crowds, experts said. Yeah, that's because everybody knows what this was. And now, and by the way, we're probably going to get one of these news stories in the next couple days. The biggest fear, individual or small groups of extremists. This is them telling you what they're going to do. Experts who monitor extremism caution the biggest danger to public safety that could come out of Trump's escalating rhetoric probably doesn't involve a large crowd of protesters. Far more concerning are small groups or individual domestic terrorists who might be inspired to take action by Trump's call for protests. They said, "Oh, fucking spare me. Oh, spare me." That's happened before. After Trump made several fiery speeches about the invasion at the U.S.-Mexico border, a far-right extremist killed 23 people in an El Paso Walmart. Who was anti-Trump, I will remind you. After the FBI raided Trump's Mar-a-Lago estate, And Trump railed online about the Bureau. A man attacked at the FBI Cincinnati field office and surrendered without incident. And by the way, took an AR rifle into the office, but used a nail gun for whatever reason instead. A less deadly weapon when he had the boogeyman killing machine on his back. And another man was arrested after an armed stand-up for threatening FBI agents on social media. With the Charlottesville rally and January 6th being obvious outliers, protests, even those held by far-right extremists, aren't usually where Americans are injured or killed by individual domestic terrorists. That usually happens in attacks driven by escalating political rhetoric, and that's what worries experts like Seagal. I am more concerned about a Nancy Pelosi husband-style attack, he said. You know, a leftoid coming off and just randomly being there in his underwear and throwing a hammer. As soon as the body cam could see him, I'm more concerned about a Pittsburgh or El Paso style attack than I am about some organized protest that leads to violence, which, by the way, they're telling you what's going to happen. Some agent is already out there typing up the script for his manifesto and totally saying that it was written years ago. But yes, your new racist dog whistle it's a trap. Alright, moving on into the protests of the flop. Barricades go up at Trump Tower, Manhattan court as New York City readies for possible protests. From Jonathan Dienst, Mark Santia, Eric Tucker, Jill Colvin, and Michelle L. Price. All eyes are on Manhattan this week for the possibility that Trump could be indicted by a grand jury investigating hush money payments to women who alleged sexual encounters with the former president. The NYPD was seen erecting barricades Monday outside Trump Tower in Manhattan Criminal Court following the former president's weekend claim that his arrest is imminent and that his supporters to protest. Those are likely among multiple high-profile locations that law enforcement officials say the NYPD will cover on Monday and Tuesday and later in the week if necessary. The police department, Secret Service, court officers, and FBI continue to meet to discuss security. All NYPD members are being directed to be in uniform Tuesday and ready to mobilize if needed, the officials said. Aside from a modest protest scheduled for Tuesday at Trump Tower, going to the Manhattan District Attorney's office, and a separate small caravan of pro-Trump cars going from Long Island to Lower Manhattan, security officials are not aware of any developments that might change the dynamic in New York City through at least Wednesday. As of Monday, there were no plans or requests for Trump, who has been at his Mar-a-Lago estate in Florida, to travel to the city this week, according to several sources. And even as Trump's lawyer and spokesperson said there had been no communication. Gentlemen, welcome. I think Into is a gentleman, by the way. I know Grant, Luke Wee, and Blind Fear are, but gentlemen, welcome. You just missed the dog whistle. You can probably back up for a little bit. Even as Trump's lawyers and spokesperson said there had been no communication from persecutors, Trump declared in a post on his social media that he expects to be taken into custody on Tuesday. Trump's message seemed to be designed to preempt a formal announcement from prosecutors and to galvanize outrage from his base of supporters in advance of widely anticipated charges. I want to remind everybody that a bank run is a peaceful protest. Just saying. It all evoked in foreboding ways the rhetoric he used shortly before the insurrection selfie fest at the U.S. Capitol on January 6th. After hearing from the then president at Washington that morning, his supporters marched to the Capitol and tried to stop the congressional certification of Democrat Biden's White House victory, breaking through the doors and windows of the building and leaving officers beaten and bloodied. You know, breaking through the doors. Oh, hey, come on, you guys, come on in. Walk around, take a tour. God, I hate these people. The New York Young Republican Club organized a rally in Lower Manhattan on Monday, and while a dozen Trump supporters donning the red MAGA hats came out, it was a more subdued affair steps from the courthouse. bet me anything that those red MAGA hats were brand new off the shelf. Had been worn for the first time that day. Paid for with funds out of McLean, Georgia. Or Virginia, not Georgia. Jeez. The protests that have taken place so far have been small in nature and very peaceful, said former NYPD Chief of Department Terry Monahan. If a pop-up demonstration happens, I know NYPD can deploy hundreds of cops in a matter of minutes. News 4 learned that the NYPD told thousands of its members to be prepared late Monday and through Tuesday for possible activity. Monday's rally wrapped up before the sun came down. We weren't sure if we wanted to come out because obviously some people don't like us. We are here to show that there is support for President Trump in the bluest area of the country, said Gavin Wax of the Young Republicans Club. A few incendiary but isolated posts also surfaced on fringe social media platforms from supporters, calling for an armed confrontation with law enforcement at Trump's Florida estate, but that so far is yet to take shape in any form because it was feds. Law enforcement agencies have been conducting preliminary security assessments. 5 senior officials familiar with the discussion said Friday to discuss potential plans for in and around Manhattan criminal court. 80s kid, welcome. Oops, tap the microphone. The officials stressed that the interagency conversations and planning are precautionary in nature because no charges have been filed. The agencies involved include the NYPD, the New York State Court officers, the U.S. Secret Service, the FBI's Joint Terrorism Task Force, and the Manhattan DA's office, officials said. So, little stuff, nothing major. We'll be looking at some of that in a bit. From ABC7 Eyewitness out of New York City, NYPD receives unfounded bomb threats as city gears up ahead of possible Trump indictment. Feds. You know, Sticks brought up an interesting point for the last couple days, that some of the ramping up may be because leftoids plan to come out and protest. Now, of course, we know that leftoids don't get arrested, so the cops will be just there to throw some tear gas and make sure that everybody stays in the designated area that they want to destroy, kind of like they did in Kenosha. You know, that major protest where nobody who protested left outside of a very, very small and poor area and wouldn't go into the affluent areas at all. Let's see. New York braced for disruptions on Tuesday that could follow a possible indictment of Trump as he faces the possibility of criminal charges. As the NYPD prepared for potential unrest, the department and other NYC agencies received numerous bomb threats in lower Manhattan on Tuesday, and not just at the courthouses, all were determined to be unfounded. Demonstrators from both sides of the aisle gathered outside the courthouse and Trump Tower on Tuesday. Intelligence bulletins obtained by ABC News warn of a significant increase in threats and general violent rhetoric. They say some of Trump's biggest supporters are still willing to fight on his behalf. They probably are, but the problem is they're not willing to go into areas where they know that they're going to get arrested and have to sit in front of Alvin Bragg. So, that is what they say for that. Let's grab one from CNN. He used to be the assistant DA in Manhattan. Hear how likely he thinks Trump's arrest is. I've not pre-watched this video, so whatever he's going to say here is going to be new to me. Let's listen.
So we've heard from, at least the reporting is that Stormy Daniels, right, has appeared before the grand jury, at least by Zoom. Not sure if there's testimony, but saying that she would be available, she and her attorneys, that she would be available. We've heard from Michael Cohen, we've heard from Robert Costello and others. This appears to be wrapping up. Everyone wants to know when it's going to happen. What is the timeline? Is it going to be today? Is it tomorrow? Is it next week? Having worked in the DA's office, is it possible to put a date or a time on that?
Within reason, there is. This is an ongoing investigation. It's not a reactive investigation. It's proactive. So the DA's office should really know at this point, and in fact, well before, who's going to testify and what, if anything, is going to happen to throw that off course. So I'd expect that they should be summing up or wrapping up soon. And then once that happens, it becomes a procedural issue. The indictment is filed, and ultimately they reach out to the team for Trump to take those next steps.
You say wrapping up soon. So what are the considerations now? If you're looking at someone who has insider knowledge, if you're looking at what is playing out, seeing Costello and Cohen, et cetera, go in, what is happening inside of the office right now?
I expect that all the evidence that they've wanted to present, they meaning the district attorney's office, has been presented. And if anything, for lack of a term, rebuttal or to clarify or to bolster, if that's the right term we want to use here, the credibility or what may have happened, that's going to come out now. But again, it's the grand jury's determination to decide what witnesses, if anything, they want to hear. But once that's wrapped up, the DA's office is ready to make those next steps.
Jeremy, is it the grand jury's determination? Because the grand jury vote to indict Donald Trump and then Alvin Bragg say, even with that, I'm not going to do it?
Once a grand jury indicts, or what's we call a true bill, they have to take that next step. Ultimately, the DA's office can decide what they want to do going forward, but once there's an indictment, it has to proceed.
Yeah. Here's the thing. This investigation has been called a zombie case. Everyone thought that after Cy Vance, that nothing was going to happen, nothing would happen for so long under the current DA, Alvin Bragg, nothing happened. So what happened? How is this resuscitated or resurrected?
Well, the argument from the DA's office is that it wasn't resuscitated. It's been going on all along. It's an ongoing investigation. These things don't happen overnight. It takes time to develop. There's those who will argue that there was political pressure with the Pomerantz book and what's happening sort of socially. But the DA's office will take the position that we've always been doing our due diligence. This is about justice. This isn't about politics. And now we're at the point where you have to move it forward.
Yeah. If you're looking at this, people are expecting, will Donald Trump be handcuffed? Are we going to see him in a jumpsuit and what have you? It doesn't really work that way, especially when you have a high-profile defendant. Unless he wants to be paraded in front of cameras, there are means and efforts to sort of mitigate that, possibly going in, probably through an underground entrance and having this sort of expedited about him. My reporting is seeing a judge and doing it quickly, having the process play out quickly so that he doesn't have to be photographed or seen doing any of these things.
Well, he shouldn't be photographed once he's inside the building, but he'll be taken in like
except for a mugshot.
Well, that absolutely. He'll be taken in. There will be a mugshot. There'll be a fingerprint. And then they're going to expedite him and walk him to the courtroom. He'll have to walk down the hallway unless for some reason they decide to bring him up through the judicial areas. So there's a separate set of elevators he can come up through.
Which they will, because a big part of what they're doing here is they want that video. They want that they want that show. They want to be able to get those photos of him walking in the handcuffs and, yes, possibly the jumpsuit, so they can plaster that on every political ad coming forward. I have no doubt, by the way, that Donald Trump is going to be arrested and indicted. Whether or not the conviction comes, I don't see that as being a possibility. Now, being in New York, it's possible that they can go jury shop until they find 12 people who are absolutely so anti-Trump they won't even listen to any of the counter evidence. That's possible. This is Manhattan. But with that being said, again, the main part of this, I actually expected this on January 21st of 2021. Like, I expected to see this on that day in January. Right afterwards, that they were going to go back and throw the cuffs on him and find some bullshit charge to hit him on. I am impressed that it took them this long to go back and find something to hit him on. In fact, I was almost certain that they were going to come back and throw the handcuffs on him and then say, okay, you're under arrest. We'll tell you what the charges are after we figure it out. But we know you did something. Lindsey Graham, who would love to see Trump supporters in prison. Lindsey Graham warns Trump arrest would blow up our country, sugar. And not like I like things blown up inside my asshole. From Alexander Bolton. Senator Lindsey Graham, the ranking member on the Senate Judiciary Committee, is warning that Manhattan DA Alvin Bragg arresting former President Trump would blow up our country. It's going to blow up our country? No. Well, I can do that one better. It's gonna blow up our country, sugar, and this is a bunch of BS. He said in a Fox and Friends interview. You've had the prosecutor before Bragg, Cyrus Vance Jr. Look at the case and pass it on. You had the U.S. Attorney in New York saying, I'm not going to do it federally, Graham said, describing the lack of interest among other prosecutors in charging Trump over a $130,000 payment his one-time fixer Michael Cohen made to an adult film actress, Stormy Daniels. Graham said Bragg is under political pressure to persecute Trump over the allegation, which surfaced publicly in 2018 because his predecessor has come under criticism from former prosecutor Mike Pomerantz, who oversaw the DA's office earlier investigation of Trump. There are some intervening cause other than Trump running, explaining why he thinks Bragg is now poised to bring charges against Trump. One of the guys in the DA's office wrote a book that was very critical of Vance. And I'm pretty critical of Vance too, because sugar, that suit is not right. So we're going to take care of that at some point. You should have prosecuted Trump and you let him off, and not like I want some of these big boys to get me off. And Bragg feels that pressure. I could go with the pressure inside the asshole joke, but I think I've gone too far with the Lindsey Graham is gay allegations already. Graham also slammed Bragg as a George Soros-backed prosecutor because that's the buzzword. Color of Change PAC, which received a large donation from Soros, a frequent GOP foil, backed the DA's 2021 campaign. And yeah, Lindsey Graham would love to see Trump supporters put in jail over this. Van Jones getting backlash. Van Jones, who was once the voice of the left, getting backlash. CNN's Van Jones trashed for warning Manhattan DA to back off Trump indictment. From Virginia Kruta. CNN regular Van Jones took some backlash after suggesting that Alvin Bragg would be wise to back off and not indict former President Trump, or at least wait and see whether he'd face charges in Georgia first. Jones made the comments during a Monday panel discussion hosted by Pamela Brown, and he argued that pushing for an indictment over hush money allegedly paid to a porn star was proof that the leftists did not have their act together with regard to coming after Trump. If anybody's a Republican and they had been afraid there is some well-organized conspiracy among progressives, they can now relax because you would not start with this charge, Jones said, adding, you would start with the charge in Georgia where he was interfering with elections. You would start with the charge that he was helping the insurrectionists in a coup. You wouldn't start with an 8-year-old porn star payoff. This is proof, if nothing else, that the progressives are not very well organized. This is not the one that you would start with. Jones went on to note that he was sure Bragg was facing mounting pressure to make something stick, but suggested that the wisest move would be to cool his heels a bit and let Georgia take the first bite at the apple. The heat is on this DA, and I think he's going to make a very sober decision, and I would not be surprised if he doesn't step back from the brink, Jones said. Let's listen.
But my view about this is I think that the heat is on this DA. I think he's going to make a very sober decision, and I would not be surprised if he doesn't step back from the brink.
And I'm going to get to you, Dana and David, in a second, but I want to follow up with you, Matt.
Oh, that was a short one. I didn't realize that. But that's enough. It doesn't seem like the right way to go. History's not going to judge Donald Trump based on Stormy Daniels. It's going to judge him based on the election. It's going to judge him based on the coup attempt. And the insurrection! Jones insisted, I think if I were Alvin, I would wait for Georgia to go first. You have the president calling in trying to change the election. That seems to me like the thing to start with, not this. Critics immediately attacked Jones for voicing his opinion. Van Jones is not a serious person and should not be taken seriously. A sentient corn on the cob, attorney Xavier Pope tweeted. I just heard Van Jones on CNN shout out to Alvin Bragg and say I'd back off and let Georgia go first. and followed up by saying he wouldn't be surprised to see Alvin Bragg back down. Be ashamed, Van. Be very ashamed, Jack Hopkins added. Yeah, he said that, oh, we're not going to be taking Orange Man out, and he's not going to be out pooping his pants and going and poopy and pee-pee and screaming and running. So Van Jones must be an evil Trump supporter. Again, spare me. From Fox 5 out of New York. Some Trump supporters gather outside Manhattan court in protest of the cause. Fed. That's all I see. Robert Costello on Monday testified before a Manhattan grand jury that's deciding whether to indict Trump, as some supporters of the former president gathered outside the courthouse to protest the case. Costello once served as a legal advisor for Trump's longtime personal lawyer and fixer, Michael Cohen. That is, until they had a falling out. Cohen previously pled guilty in connection with hush money payments made to porn actress Stormy Daniels and a model, which he says were directed by Trump. Cohen testified before the grand jury twice last week. Costello said Cohen is an unreliable witness because he's a liar. He went to jail, and now he's on the revenge tour, Costello said Monday. That's why I went there today, to tell these people who the real Michael Cohen is. And we can look at some of the things here. Our friend of the show, Quest Fanning, who is typically a great advertiser of the show, he went down and passed Trump Tower. A few press cameras, as usual, slightly heightened security, more trucks full of sand, and zero protesters. Which, I mean, to be fair, why would they protest at Trump Tower when they want to send the message to Alvin Bragg? But again, and Happy Merlot is happy, says, the protesters that do show up. Yeah, those ones. Another one here. This one is the one that the big pro-Biden accounts are shouting out right now. Suburban Black Man tweets out, we're supposed to think that these are authentic Trump supporters in front of Trump Tower in New York City right now. Notice the masks. This is universal cult symbol of the left. Yeah. Mask. Fed.
One more time.
Mask.
One more time.
Mask in hand.
One more time.
Yeah, these are not serious people. The badmouth says definitely an Antifa instigator. Conservatives are just different in their politics. They carry themselves differently. When you know, you know. The way they look to each other for approval gives them away. Yup. Because again, if you show up anywhere in these areas, they will be pinging your cell phone and they will be arresting you. From Politico, MAGA protesters in Manhattan crowded out by anti-Trump rivals. And see, those people don't have to worry about getting arrested. They just show up and do whatever it is that they want to do. And nobody has anything to say to those. From Wesley Parnell, demonstrators who wanted Trump indictment far outnumbered MAGA supporters Tuesday morning outside the Manhattan criminal court, where the former president is expected to be charged as early as Wednesday. The pro-indictment protesters gathered in front of the building where Manhattan DA Alvin Bragg is investigating Trump over a hush money payment made to Stormy Daniels during the 2016 presidential campaign. No one is above the law, the group of about 20 demonstrators chanted. Alvin Bragg, do your job, they yelled. Across the street from the anti-Trump rally, 5 supporters of the former president walked around holding signs, including one that highlighted Liberal billionaire George Soros' support for Bragg a common right-wing talking point. Trump has seized on a $500,000 donation to Bragg from a PAC funded by Soros that was part of a nationwide effort to help elect progressive DAs. I wish more people had shown up, said federal agent posing as a Trump supporter Philip Lejeune. The 30-year-old Jersey resident said he expected more people to show up after Trump's post on social media platform Truth Social over the weekend. By afternoon, a few more pro-Trump protesters arrived outside the courthouse, including one man dressed as Q Shaman, who was riding a bicycle. The newcomers engaged in shouting matches with pro-indictment demonstrators, but the tension quickly died down. It was not clear if the pro-Trump supporters were sincere or performance artists. We know who they were. The media might want to play dumb, but we know who they were. And of course, he's got to go after DeSantis. Trump attacks DeSantis after governor slammed Soros-funded DA, cited hush money, minors, or a man might accuse DeSantis. From Ryan Saavedra. Former President Trump took aim at Florida Governor Ron DeSantis on Monday after the governor addressed reports that progressive Manhattan DA Alvin Bragg is intending to charge the former president. In his comments, DeSantis slammed the George Soros-funded DA for weaponizing the justice system, while also quipping about the alleged hush money Trump paid to porn actress Stormy Daniels. The back and forth comes as political tensions have risen across the country after Trump claimed over the weekend he was going to be arrested on Tuesday over an alleged $130,000 payment made to Daniels during the 2016 presidential election. A spokesperson for Trump later said the former president has been given no notification on any specifics about the DA's plan.
Ron DeSanctimonious will probably find out about the false accusations and fake stories sometime in the future as he gets older, wiser, better known, when he's unfairly and illegally attacked a woman, even classmates who are underage, or possibly a man.
Trump wrote on social media,
"I'm sure you will want to fight these misfits just like I do."
Trump deleted the previous swing at DeSantis and replaced it with a post that goes even further. And what did he choose to cite with this? The Midas touch. You know, he does smart things, and sometimes I wonder if this is a show to just try to get people talking about him again. Because he does, under most circumstances, again, tend to suck the air out of the room. But I mean, come on. Alright, I got a pair back-to-back from Fox. Some Democrats fear arresting Trump could backfire. Question strength of charges from Anders Hagstrom. Some Democrats fear that any potential charges facing former President Trump from the Manhattan DA's office are not up to the task and could backfire. Manhattan DA Alvin Bragg may soon indict former President Trump on charges related to hush money payments. We know that. This is an open shut books and records misdemeanor, Norm Eisen, a attorney and senior Brookings fellow, said on Monday. Now to elevate it to a felony is more complicated. There are far more serious crimes for which he should also be held to account, David Pepper, a former chair of the Ohio Democratic Party, told Axios. Well, what are they? Bragg's investigation is just one of the 3 Trump is currently facing, and the charges stemming from it may be the easiest ones for Trump to defeat. A failed prosecution of the former president, whose opponents have long dreamed of locking him up, could only serve to bolster his common refrain that he's the victim of a
witch hunt. It's the worst witch hunt in history, okay?
Trump would be the first former president in U.S. history to face criminal charges if Bragg's office levels them. The potential indictment is expected to allege campaign and finance infractions related to records keeping, a slim pretext for such a high-profile case. And again, we don't know if this goes anywhere. But the last one that we'll talk about, the Orange Man on, is that he's also making a move on the records case. stolen records case. Trump's lawyers demand NARA records to expose highly politicized documents probe of the former president. From Brooks Singman. Former President Trump's legal team is demanding the National Archives and Records admin turn over documents that they say will expose the highly politicized agency for attempting to criminalize a civil dispute over classified materials in an unconstitutional and unprecedented weaponization of the Presidential Records Act. Attorneys representing the former president in special counsel investigation into his alleged mishandling and proper retention of classified records, James Trusty, Lindsay Halligan, and Evan Corcoran filed a Freedom of Information Act request with the National Archives and Records admin on Monday. Trusty told Fox News Digital that attorneys are demanding documents that will expose NARA's completely different treatment of President Trump from every other president. What we expect to find are highly politicized bureaucrats who worked in tandem with the DOJ and politicians to criminalize a dispute that never had criminal implications, Trusty said. We are confident that a substantive response to our demands from NARA will firmly establish a different and politicized treatment of President Trump. Trump's legal team is calling for NARA to turn over records related to its dispute resolution process and communications about how the agency characterizes presidential records, its process for establishing secure locations for past presidents to maintain possession of those records, and other information. This request covers records located in any office within NARA, including its Office of General Counsel, each of its field and regional offices, and the Clinton Presidential Library and Museum, and the W Presidential Center and the Obama Presidential Library, the record stated. Trump's legal team hopes to reveal that the underpinnings of the Justice Department's investigation into Trump's handling of classified records are rotten and use criminal tools when they shouldn't have. Well, we'll see. It'd be interesting to see where precedent lies in this and how this gets treated. We know that these former presidents took classified records home with them, with, of course, the ability to declassify. It'll be an interesting case. I don't know if there's going to be enough there to overturn the investigation, but it'll be interesting to see what's revealed from it and what the attorneys plan to do with it. So we'll see what happens with that. Let's talk budget, shall we? From Axios. White House sounds alarm on Freedom Caucus's budget plan. From Sophia Kai. I've seen rumblings of it. I haven't read the whole thing, but I'm going to say off the bat, I'm also not a fan. The White House will take a preemptive shot at Republicans on the federal budget this week, ruling out a blistering 5-point critique of a plan by the far-right House Freedom Caucus, Axios has learned. The Biden admin, still waiting for Republicans' official budget plan for fiscal year 2024, is trying to gain tactical advantage in the upcoming budget talks by casting a proposal by 36 GOP hardliners as a 5-alarm fire for Americans. The Freedom Caucus's plan calls for across-the-board cuts in U.S. agencies, funding by capping the spending at 2022 levels for the next 10 years. It could end Biden's $400 billion student loan forgiveness program, reclaim unspent COVID funds, increase work requirements for welfare recipients, and more. House Republicans insist that the Biden cut his $6.8 trillion budget, or they won't approve raising the debt ceiling, a move that could create economic calamity. Each day this week, the White House plans to show how part of the Freedom Caucus plan would hurt Americans, including using new analyses, propaganda, by agencies and the OMB. Today, Biden admin officials will say cuts to the police funding and train safety would endanger public safety. Because, of course, it all has to be done at the federal level, in spite of the fact that these agencies are typically state and local. Tuesday, they aim to show how healthcare and energy cuts required by the Freedom Caucus plan would raise costs for families. On Wednesday, the White House will emphasize how cuts in incentives for manufacturing investments would undermine U.S. workers by sending manufacturing jobs overseas. Thursday, they'll say cuts to Medicare would be required, hurting seniors. And Friday, that defense cuts would be necessary, weakening national security. The proposal from the Freedom Caucus came just after Biden announced a plan that he said would trim deficits by nearly $3 trillion over 10 years. through various savings efforts and raising taxes on those earning more than $400,000 a year. The Freedom Caucus is led by Scott Perry of Pennsylvania, who has indicated that if Biden won't accept huge cuts, Republicans won't vote to raise the debt ceiling and will blame the president if the U.S. defaults on its debt. Yeah, but again, and I appreciate what it is that they're doing. I really do. But something to keep in mind is the fact that the president has captive media in his pocket. America will not default on our debts unless President Biden chooses to do so, Perry said. From the Hill, White House calls conservative GOP group's budget proposal a five-alarm fire. From Alex Gangitano. And again, this is, by the way, going to be one of those things where this is hard because of what the Freedom Caucus did. Now, would I like to see the spending cuts that the Freedom Caucus put forward? Yes. We need to. We're at a point where we're struggling here. But with that being said, no matter what it is that McCarthy brings forward, the only thing that's going to be trotted out on the mainstream media is what the Freedom Caucus put out. McCarthy could put out a spending proposal with moderate cuts, but still funds every single pet project that Biden wants, just in a reduced fashion. And put cuts to Republican pet projects. And the only thing the mainstream media is going to show all over it is going to be what the Freedom Caucus put out. From Alex Gangitano. The White House on Monday called the House Freedom Caucus's budget proposal a five-alarm fire, arguing that spending cuts would endanger American safety. The White House referred to the conservative GOP group as the extreme MAGA Republican House Freedom Caucus because they have to have that four-letter word in there no matter what, in a statement, and said the proposal would be a disaster for families in at least 5 key ways. The key ways, according to the White House, include endangering public safety, raising costs for families, shipping and manufacturing jobs overseas, and undermining American workers, weakening national security, and hurting seniors. The statement argued that the proposal would make the border less secure because it would eliminate funding for more than 2,000 border agents and allow for additional 150,000 pounds of cocaine, nearly 900 pounds of fentanyl, nearly 2,000 pounds of heroin, and more than 17,000 pounds of meth into our country. Biden's budget included funds to hire an additional 350 Border Patrol agents, $535 million for border technology, and at and between ports of entry, and $40 million to combat fentanyl trafficking. But no wall. And the White House argued the Freedom Caucus proposal would defund the police and make communities less safe, because it would eliminate 400 local law enforcement positions, and could mean a hiring freeze at the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives. Okay, what's the downside to that last part? That shouldn't even be a federal agency. That should be a convenience store. The White House also said the proposal would scale back rail safety because, of course, now that's going to be the next thing on everybody's mind. Especially in the wake of train derailments in Ohio that led to a politically charged situation over Biden not visiting the site. Which, by the way, nobody's asking him to do that anymore. Because now it's all the DA! I would hate to be the people in East Palestine right now because the whole thing with the DA just got them shoved completely under the rug. And 30,000 fewer miles of track inspected annually. And it said the proposal would jeopardize air safety and increase airport security wait times by an average of 30 minutes because it would shut down services at 125 air traffic control towers across the country. Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg last week said there have been more mistakes than usual in U.S. air travel after dozens of close calls, calling for the industry to figure out the causes. So, this fight is out, and the claws are out. And of course, his top officials are defending why he needs to spend so much money. Biden's top officials and a group of highly paid actors on Twitter are to defend his $6.8 trillion budget plan before skeptical GOP this week. From Elizabeth Elkind, President Biden's top cabinet secretaries, who are all poised to make money or get better budgets off of this thing, will be summoned to Capitol Hill this week to defend his $6.8 trillion budget proposal for the next fiscal year in front of a divided Congress and a skeptical GOP majority in the House that's looking to cut spending next year. Officials such as Pete Buttigieg, Anthony Blinken, and Janet Yellen are expected to face partisan fireworks at GOP-led House hearings, while also sitting for lines of inquiry that are likely to be more reserved in the Democrat majority Senate. Republicans have argued that Biden's proposal to impose $3 trillion in new taxes on corporations and wealthy Americans would hurt the economy, while the billions in funding for progressive policy points are out of step with families that are suffering under inflation. Democrats have lauded projections that show Biden's budget will reduce the budget deficit over the next decade. Yeah, you know what'll reduce that budget even more? Cutting the spending. The marathon budget hearings kick off on Wednesday with 3 separate Senate Appropriations Subcommittee hearings. Yellen and Blinken will testify in front of their respective Senate subcommittees on their fiscal 2024 budget proposals for their respective departments. Xavier Becerra will sit before the Health and Human Services Subcommittee in the Senate Finance Committee to discuss the president's plan for HHS. So, the fireworks start tomorrow, and hopefully we'll have some good clips for this. Some more from the Trump war room, with him taking aim at the banks that are all but to be forgotten in the wake of his indictment. Let's listen.
Joe Biden has been a disaster for the economy. Between his massive tax hikes, his anti-energy crusade, and his trillions of dollars in wasteful spending, Biden caused the highest inflation in almost half a century. As a result, interest rates soared to crushing levels, and now we are seeing bank failures that nobody believed even possible just 2 years ago. Joe Biden is leading us toward a Great Depression. I've been saying it for a long time. There should be no bailouts, but we need to get this economy straightened out as fast as possible. We're headed down a very dangerous path. When I'm back in the White House, I will immediately unleash energy production, slash regulations like I did just 3 years ago, and repeal Biden's tax hikes to get inflation down as fast as possible, and it will go quickly, so that interest rates can get back under control. I built the greatest economy in the history of the world. In fact, I did it twice when you think about it. And now we will have to do it again. Thank you very much.
Yeah, we're getting there. Again, I do think that my job is safe, but I am watching to see what happens. I am paying close attention to see. Some banking news from Barron's. First Republic keeps falling despite more rescue talk. From Carleton English and Column Keown. Some of that has seemed to level out, because this is a story from yesterday, so we won't spend a lot of time on this one. I'm going to take this down just a touch. Shares of First Republic were still falling Monday, despite more talks by big bank CEOs to stabilize the regional bank, the Wall Street Journal reports. The talks include a potential investment by JP Morgan and other banks that already put $30 billion in deposits into First Republic, according to the Journal, citing people familiar with the matter. Those deposits could be converted into an investment. A sale of the bank or capital injection are also options, the Journal reported, again citing people familiar with the matter, unnamed of course. First Republic shares were off 39%, around $14 in mid-afternoon trading as of yesterday. The stock, which fell sharply at the open, could also be reacting to another development. S&P Global cut the regional bank's credit rating again and warned a $30 billion rescue package won't be enough. The free fall in First Republic doesn't appear to be spilling over to other bank stocks. Invesco KBW Regional Banking Exchange Traded Fund was up 1.5% around midday. JP Morgan was ahead 0.7%. And again, the problem with First Republic is not the fact that they're not getting money. They are. The fact is, and I talked about this at the end of last week, that you can pump money like it's going out of style into a bank like First Republic. And again, I used an example of myself for this when I talked about it. The fact that I had a cousin who was like, he saw that I was struggling and was not afraid to throw some money at me whenever I needed it, but it didn't solve the underlying problem. It kept me going for a little while, but it didn't solve the underlying problem. Part of it was a lack of jobs in the area for people like me. Part of it was a bit of a haunting history and somebody who was actually actively trying to keep me from getting work. And part of it was that, yeah, there was some underlying depression that was hurting it was making me my own worst enemy, essentially. Many of these things had to be addressed before I could get out from under myself and make it in the world. Unless you address the underlying cause, you can throw money at a problem for as much as you want, and it won't fix anything. JP Morgan advising First Republic on strategic alternatives, including a capital raise, sources say. Be careful with this because this is what led to the collapse of SVB. Was a capital raise. From Jesse Pound. JP Morgan is advising embattled First Republic on strategic alternatives, sources told CNBC's David Faber. The alternatives may include a capital raise, the sources said, which could dilute current shareholders. A sale of the bank is also a possibility. First Republic shares dropped 47% in a volatile session, extending a dramatic decline in March. The stock is down 90% to date. The Wall Street Journal reported earlier that JP Morgan and its CEO Jamie Dimon were working with others in the industry on a solution for the bank, whose shares were down 87% this month. JP Morgan and 10 other banks announced last week that they were depositing a combined $30 billion. We know about that. But it continued to fall because we haven't addressed the root cause of the problem. Bad investment at a time when it seemed like good investment, but with no long-term future plan, to a spending spree federal government that was going to spend you into oblivion. With the raised interest rates making these treasuries almost worthless at this point. You've got no place to go but down. Yes, you can go back and, as JP Morgan is suggesting, go back to try to sell bonds to try to make up some of the loss, but that was what set everything in motion for the end of SVB, Silicon Valley Bank. And even there, you can go back and sell the bank off, and it'll help. It'll keep some of these people working, but you will be passing along the risky investments from one little bank into one big bank who can at least absorb them, but their stock is going to take a hit when they do. Because you didn't address the root cause of the problem. You threw money at it. On the SVB side, from Reuters, FDIC to break up SVB seeks separate sale of a private unit. From Manya Saini. I hate to say it, but there was something else going on with this one. I don't know quite what, but the entire banking industry would have been better had the FDIC waited 3 hours to see if they could find a buyer for this and start bidding instead of just taking it over and shutting it down right away. The employees would have had different colored uniform shirts, but other than that, everybody would have walked away fine from this. Which tells me that there was something else that they wanted to happen from this. The FDIC on Monday decided to break up Silicon Valley Bank and hold 2 separate auctions. for its traditional deposits unit and its private bank after failing to find a buyer for the failed lender last week. It will seek bids for SVB's private bank until March 22nd and for the bridge bank until March 24th. The private bank, which is housed within SVB's retail operations, caters to high net worth individuals. Bank and non-bank financial firms will be allowed to bid on the asset portfolio, the regulator said. First Citizens Bank shares, one of the biggest buyers of failed U.S. lenders, has submitted a bid for all of Silicon Valley Bank. One source with knowledge of the matter said if FDIC decides to receive bids for parts of SVB, First Citizens also expects to bid, Bloomberg reported earlier this month, on their interest in SVB. So, it seems like they want it to be broken up and they want different people to own both sides of it, but the bidding stops on the private firm tomorrow, so we'll see where that lands. From CNBC, Republicans request Fed and FDIC oversight records for failed Silicon Valley Bank and Signature Bank. From Christina Wilkie. The top Republicans on committees that oversee the U.S. financial system sent letters on Monday to Jerome Powell and Martin Greenberg, the FDIC chair, formally requesting documents and personnel records related to the oversight of the two banks that failed over the last 11 days. The lawmakers wanted full information about what appears to be glaring bank mismanagement, fundamental lack of prudence in bank risk and balance sheet management, and regulators' lack of basic supervision and enforcement of safety and soundness rules, regulation, and principles, wrote House Financial Services Committee Chairman Patrick McHenry and Senate Banking Committee Chairman Tim Scott. A spokesperson for the Federal Reserve told CNBC on Monday it received its letter and planned to respond. A spokesperson for the FDIC declined to comment, citing agency policy regarding congressional correspondence. The letters come as Congress seeks to learn more about how the second largest bank collapse in U.S. history unfolded earlier this month, when SVB went in just a matter of days from fully operational to government-owned on March 10th. New York-based Signature Bank failed 2 days later before the U.S. bank regulators put the backstop to cover uninsured deposits and other safeguards for the broader system. See, the problem that I have with this is not the fact that they're not looking into this, or that they're looking into this. I don't mind that. I kind of want to see what happened there myself, but given the fact of the politicized nature of this, I do fully understand the fact that this is going to be an attempt to come back out and scream, ESG was the root cause! Get everything out of ESG right now! Oh my god! So we'll watch that. From CBS. SVB and First Republic's problems aren't going away. Here's why. From Amy Peachy. Because they didn't address the root cause of the problem. The tumult is raising the specter of the 2008 global financial crisis, which sparked the Great Recession. No, that's not what sparked the Great Recession. A housing collapse because of regulations championed by the Clinton administration to make sure that people who couldn't actually afford the houses still got to live the American dreams. On top of financial issues that were carried over from the Carter administration, were what led to the Great Recession in 2008. In fact, and having studied the economic situation that led up to the Great Recession, I can actually calmly say that the only reason the Great Recession didn't happen in 2003 was because we went to war in Iraq and a lot of families that were on the cusp started bringing home combat pay. But we were spiraling before we got to 2008. The word at the top of everyone's mind at the moment is contagion. Will the troubles at SVB, Credit Suisse, and others spread to wider banking sector and lead to an 08-like banking crisis? Said LPL Financial Chief Equity Strategist Jeffrey Buckbinder and other LPL experts on Monday in a research note. Another 190 banks are in danger of failure even if half of their uninsured depositors withdraw their funds, indicating that Silicon Valley Bank isn't alone in facing risks from a classic run on the bank, according to a new analysis from researchers at Stanford, Columbia, Northwestern, and University of Southern California, which again, I remind you, these banks like this, Northwestern, SVB, Credit Suisse, things like that, and the 190 banks that are in danger of failure, all have big ties to the Uniparty and big donations to the Uniparty. I'm not telling you to do anything. All I'm going to remind you is that a bank run is a peaceful protest. And I'll let you decide what to do with that. Another one from CNBC. Got a lot of them from there today. Mid-sized U.S. banks reportedly asked the FDIC to insure all deposits for 2 years. Coming to CNBC from Reuters. A coalition of mid-sized U.S. banks, Mid-sized Bank Coalition of America, has asked regulators to extend FDIC insurance to all deposits for the next 2 years. The letter argued that extending insurance will immediately stop the exodus of deposits from smaller banks, which in turn will stabilize the banking sector and restore confidence in the banking system, the report said. The collapse of SVB, which held a high number of uninsured deposits beyond the FDIC guaranteed limit, prompted customers to move their money to bigger banks and triggered sharp sell-off in banking stocks. According to a Bloomberg report, the group proposed that the expanded insurance program be paid for by the banks themselves by increasing the deposit insurance assessment on lenders that choose to participate in the increased coverage. The FDIC did not immediately respond to a Reuters request for comment, while the MBCA could not be immediately contacted. And guess where that money is going to come out of if there is a bank run? Give you a hint, the government doesn't get anything that it first didn't take from you. Alright, on the Biden veto, we've only got one story on that one. Manchin does not hold back when criticizing Biden for absolutely infuriating veto. Radical social and environmental agenda from Chris Enlow. Do we have video? No video. Joe Manchin pulled no punches on Monday after President Biden vetoed legislation that had some support from Democrats. We read this. What did Manchin say? The moderate Democrat condemned Biden for taking absolutely infuriating action. The admin continues to prioritize their radical policy agenda over its economic, energy, and national security needs of our country. And it's absolutely infuriating, Manchin said in a statement. West Virginians are under increasing stress as we continue to recover from a once-in-a-generation pandemic, pay the bills amid record inflation, and face the largest land war in Europe since World War II, the statement added. The admin's unrelenting campaign to advance a radical social and environmental agenda is only exacerbating those challenges. By allowing the Labor Department to continue to make ESG decisions, Manchin said Biden is weakening our energy, national, and economic security. Despite a clear and bipartisan rejection of the rule from Congress, President Biden is choosing to put his admin's progressive agenda over the well-being of the American people, Manchin said. Neither Tester nor Golden have commented on Biden's veto, and it's not clear how these Democrats are MAGA Republicans, as Biden said of the bill's supporter. The House could hold a vote to overturn the veto as early as next week. The effort is doomed to fail because Republicans do not have enough support from Democrats to reach the two-thirds threshold required to overturn a presidential veto. So, a lot of it's for show, and Biden's still going to Biden, but glad to see that there are at least people that are willing to stand up and do the right thing. From CNN. Some Ukrainian news for you. U.S. to send Patriot missile system and tanks to Ukraine faster than originally planned. From Natasha Bertrand. U.S. Patriot missile defense systems and Abrams tanks are set to be deployed to Ukraine faster than originally planned, U.S. defense officials said on Tuesday. A group of 65 Ukrainian soldiers will complete their training on these systems at Fort Sill, Oklahoma, in the coming days, the defense officials said. The troops will then move on to Europe for additional training in the 2 Patriot systems, one American and one built by the Germans and Dutch, that will be deployed to Ukraine in the coming weeks, the officials told reporters at Fort Sill. The announcement of the acceleration of the Patriot deployments came shortly after it was reported that the U.S. will accelerate the time it takes to ship Abrams tanks to Ukraine by sending older M1A1 models of America's main battle tank instead of the more modern version of the tank, according to 2 U.S. officials. The decision to speed up the delivery of the tanks and Patriots comes as Ukraine is preparing to launch a spring offensive against Russian forces, built largely around the more powerful and more advanced systems Western countries have agreed to send, including tanks and other armored vehicles. Yeah, the song in the background is called Black-Capped Chickadee. It's by DJ Cutman and Bird Boy. It's a fun song. And of course, with it being winter in Wisconsin still, one of the few birds that's still around for us to listen to is the black-capped chickadee. The DJ Cutman and Bird Boy album is a lot of fun. If you haven't checked it out, it's not video game stuff, even though DJ Cutman is primarily a video game DJ, but it's a lot of fun. They have a robin, black-capped chickadee. They got a couple other ones too. Widgeon, I know, is one of them, which is a type of duck. All right, so they're gonna push this as far as they can until, well, Russia hauls off and throws something at a NATO member. I'm convinced. All right, let's come back locally here. Tim Walz in my neighboring state. Luke Wee, this one's for you. Minnesota Governor Tim Walz has signed a law guaranteeing free breakfast and lunch for all students in the state, regardless of how much money their parents make. Tens of thousands of food-insecure kids will benefit. We're going to say the same thing that we said about First Republic, by the way.
It is now law.
Crank that down a little bit, huh?
Ow! My eyes! And my legs hurt too.
Yeah, that wasn't planned by any stretch of the imagination.
Good job, Webster.
All right, from Carol Evan. An outlet I grew up watching my news from, by the way, actually. It was one of the local stations where I grew up. Governor Walz signs free school meals bill for Minnesota students. From the Associated Press, Bill Strand and John Croman. On Friday, Governor Walz visited Webster Elementary School in Minneapolis and signed a bill that would provide Minnesota students with free breakfast and lunch. Community activists, youth leaders, and lawmakers attended the news conference in Northeast Minneapolis on Friday afternoon. Thought it was Thursday in the afternoon. What have you got to lose? Great, now I have that song stuck in my head. If this were easy, this would have been done a long time ago, Governor Walz said before signing the bill into law. Governor Walz says Minnesota is the fourth state to make meals free at school, joining California, Colorado, and Maine. Did you know that they're actually talking about doing Lunchables for the free school lunches? But they're not like actual Lunchables. It's a fortified version of Lunchables. Which, by the way, I have Lunchables for lunch almost every day. Because it's a cheap and easy source of low amount of calories. While I'm trying to trim this up here. because they don't want to buy a bigger size pants. Not ready to do that yet. 34 is the limit. It was obvious from the words of those who wrote and shepherded this legislation it was about more than dollars and cents. Among them was Lieutenant Governor Peggy Flanagan, who fought back tears at times while telling the assembled crowd that while growing up she was among the Minnesota children who didn't know where their next meal was coming from. She said the bill will remove barriers to learning and end the stigma and embarrassment of kids whose families can't afford lunch. I was 1 in 6 of those Minnesota children who experienced hunger. I'm one of the children who grew up in the different colored lunch ticket because my family utilized free and reduced price lunch. Flanagan shared, there were nights where I ate and my mom said she simply wasn't hungry. It wasn't until I was an adult and a parent that I realized she was lying to protect me from the reality of our food insecurity and that she was hungry. The lieutenant governor had a picture of her mother, Pat, next to the podium as she spoke, saying the bill was the most important thing I've ever worked on in my life. I call this bill the Pat Flanagan School Meals Act, Flanagan said with a smile. The school lunch bill won approval in the state Senate on Tuesday. It was a Democrat priority this session, but even a few Republicans crossed over. The Senate passed the bill 38-26. The House agreed to the Senate's version of the measure, sending it over to the governor's desk. Being hungry makes the learning almost impossible, Democrat Senator Heather Gustafson of the Van Nuys Heights, the lead author, who is also a teacher, said earlier this week. This is a bill that will ensure every student K through 12 in a Minnesota school is going to get the food they need while they're at school. Nearly 275,000 Minnesota students currently get free or reduced price lunches. Again, I'm not entirely opposed. I wish it would be by private charity, of course. I am never in favor of the government doing stuff like this because they cheap out on everything that they can. But with this being said, I'm not opposed to there being programs for people who are underprivileged to get the lunches. Every once in a while. Or even in some situations, permanently. But this doesn't address the underlying problem. And that is the issue at hand. Again, you can throw money at it, and you can get these kids a free lunch, teach a man to fish and he eats for life, but give a man a fish and he eats for a day. And again, you're dooming these kids into a cycle of poverty because they don't learn any better, and they don't learn from their parents' mistakes. As cruel as it is, until you sit back and address why kids are going hungry, what's causing this, and what we can do to fix this. This is a band-aid on a problem that requires stitches and surgery. And I've never understood why Democrats don't say that. Well, I do understand that because part of their policies do keep people in these situations, but I've never understood why people don't understand, why they don't get that throwing a band-aid on a problem doesn't fix the problem. From the Daily Wire, Biden released a statement about declassifying intelligence on the origins of the pinko pox pandemic. We might finish today. We've only got 3 more left after this. President Brandon announced this week he will be declassifying intelligence related to the origins of the pinko pox pandemic, just days after Congress unanimously passed legislation forcing the issue. Biden signed Senator Hawley's Pinko Pox Origin Act of 2023 into law on Monday, saying he shares Congress's goal of releasing as much information as possible about the origin of the disease in 2019. We still need to get to the bottom of the origins to help ensure we can better prevent future pandemics, man. My administration will continue to review all classified information relating to the COVID's origins, including potential links to the Wuhan Institute of Virology. Who's getting thrown under the bus, I wonder? However, Biden, of course, within his purview, may have portions of the intelligence redacted for the purpose of protecting U.S. national security, and we won't know what portions these are because they will be redacted. So we may never learn the origins of this, but he's at least making a statement and making it look like he's doing good. From the LA Times. More government assistance. Prescription for housing. California wants Medicaid to cover 6 months of rent. You know, the rest of us are looking at saying, hey, can we find a way to streamline Medicaid and get more people off of it so it's not such a huge expense? You know, get them into jobs, get them into better jobs so they can afford their regular insurance. Meanwhile, California's out here saying, hey, let's blow out the budget and use it for 6 months of rent for everybody who's on it. From Angela Hart. Gavin Newsom, whose admin is struggling to contain a worsening homelessness crisis despite record spending, is trying something bold. Tapping federal healthcare funding to cover rent for homeless people and those at risk of losing their housing. States are barred from using federal Medicaid dollars to pay directly for rent, but California's governor is asking the admin of President Biden, a fellow Democrat, to authorize a new program called Transitional Rent, which would provide up to 6 months of rent or temporary housing for low-income enrollees who rely on the state's healthcare safety net, a new initiative of its arsenal of programs to fight and prevent homelessness. I've been talking to the president. We cannot do this alone, Newsom told KHN. The governor is pushing California's version of Medicaid, called Medi-Cal, to fund experimental housing subsidies for homeless people, betting that it's cheaper for taxpayers to cover rent than to allow people to fall into crisis or costly institutional care in hospitals, nursing homes, and jails, especially early in his tenure, rather. Newsom proclaimed that doctors should be able to write prescriptions for housing the same way they do for insulin or antibiotics. But it's a risky endeavor in a high-cost state where median rent is nearly $3,000 a month, and even higher cost in coastal regions where most of California's homeless people reside. Oh, nearly $3,000? Median? Wait for that to go up. What do we know about this? And we've had this argument before. Again, if this was under a private benefactor, not the government, but a private benefactor who would actually demand transparency from the people who are renting out the apartments and say that, okay, you can get off this program after 6 months, or if you can't, you're right back out on the streets, I would actually be a little bit warm to this idea of, hey, let's get some of these people out here getting this up. Now, one of the problems with this, of course, is there going to be enough housing in California to cover their massive homeless population? And I don't know that that's going to be the case, but what do we know about when the government pays the bills? For insurance and healthcare costs. For education and student loans. What always happens every time the government starts paying the bill? The service goes way the hell up. Because it's a guaranteed rent. There were apartments, by the way, and houses on the block that I lived in Kenosha. My rent was $5.25 a month, which I couldn't afford by myself, and I have to have a roommate for, and it was in a 2-bedroom. That was ridiculously cheap, especially considering what I pay for this godforsaken closet that I live in now. There were places around me in one of the worst neighborhoods in Kenosha that were going for $1,000 a month because they were Section 8, and the owners, who never saw the apartments ever, the houses or apartments, I think they came up and bought them, like picked them up, but they might have even sent somebody else to do that. The owners just went through and bought up entire blocks of Kenosha and then never went and visited them again because, well, they'd probably get killed in a neighborhood like that, knowing full well that they could mark them as Section 8 and the government would pay the bills, and it would just go right into their pockets. Once you start having the government pay the bill, and guaranteed, that is going to price up more people out of the market and make more homelessness. You dolts. I don't understand why people don't see this. Because it literally happens all the time. From the Hill. Putin visits occupied city of Mariupol. From Stephen Newcomb. Russian President Vladimir Putin visited the occupied Ukrainian port city of Mariupol on Sunday, following a trip over the weekend to Crimea that marked the 9-year anniversary of Moscow's illegal annexation of the peninsula. Can you explain to me illegal annexation? Putin's surprise visit to Mariupol, which was reported by Russian state news, was his first to the territory, which his military has occupied since September. The visit also marked a show of defiance from Putin, whose visits to Crimea and Mariupol come after the ICC issued an arrest warrant for him on war crime charges. A UN report released last week concluded that the Russian military had likely committed war crimes and crimes against humanity during its war in Ukraine. The ICC warrant accused Putin of a war crime for the deportation. Yeah, we know what that was. We went over that in detail on Thursday last week. The Kremlin said it does not recognize the jurisdiction of the court, meaning the accusations are null and void. Mariupol fell violently to Russian forces at the beginning of the war after Ukrainian troops fought back advances. A bombing of a theater in the city, which was housing displaced families, killed hundreds. Yeah, who wants to guess where that bomb came from? Russian news said on Sunday Putin arrived in the city by helicopter and then drove himself around some memorial sites. I mean, it's occupied, it's his territory. If he can assure his own safety by the military, have at it. But I do think that, just like what we talked about with Alvin Bragg yesterday, and the fact that he's out here saying, oh, well, we will use the full support of law enforcement if you come out here. And I think that there was a part of this of old Vlad saying, come on, Zelensky, you won't do it. No balls. And one of the last ones here from CW69 out of Atlanta. Wyoming outlaws abortion pills. From Michael King. As the fight over abortion pills heats up nationally, Wyoming on Friday prohibited the medication in what NARAL Pro-Choice America called the first of its kind law, and also enacted a near-total ban on abortion. Governor Gordon signed a bill making it a felony to prescribe, sell, or use any drug for the purpose of procuring or performing an abortion. Violators could face up to 6 months and a $9,000 fine. The legislation takes effect July 1st. Medication abortions are already included in the overall abortion bans in a number of states. Some states have restricted telehealth abortion care, limiting access to medication abortion. A leading abortion rights advocate said Wyoming's explicit prohibition of the pills is unique. There's no stone that anti-choice extremists will leave unturned, as they seek to do everything they can to ensure that abortion is banned across the nation. NARAL Pro-Choice America President Mini Timaraju said in a statement on Saturday, this first-of-its-kind ban on medication abortion, as well as the total ban, are just the latest proof. Meanwhile, a federal judge in Texas could soon rule in a case seeking to overturn FDA approval of a drug used in medication abortions. The law seeks to block access nationwide to mifepristone. You can't do that, by the way. The first of 2 drugs used in the process. You can't do that, Texas. That was the point of Roe being overturned, Texas. And this is why I don't like what some of these states are doing. Now, in Wyoming's case, this is only the sale use within its own state borders. People can go across state lines and do what they want. And they can't, like, Wyoming can't go back and prosecute you for crossing state lines. As much as the pro-choice, pro-abortion side of it wants to try to make you believe that, that is not constitutional. And that will fail on the first arrest. If I, with the exception of my CDL, were to take a jog over to... Luke Wee, is it legal in Minnesota? I don't remember. I think it is. We're going to make... No, we'll use Illinois as the example because I know it's legal down there. In Wisconsin, it is medical only for weed. But I could go down and see my friend in Pingree Heights, Illinois, and get absolutely baked out of my mind. Like, baked to a ridiculous amount. And the only issue that I would have when I came back to Wisconsin would be if the federal DOT decided to pop me on a drug test. Because I have a CDL. They don't do that very often. But if they decided to, I would be fucked. As far as my driver's license goes, I would have to go back to having a regular driver's license. But there's nothing that Madison or Evers' DOJ could do to me as long as I did not possess. And it's not about being high, it's about possession. As long as I did not possess within the state of Wisconsin, there's absolutely zero that the Madison DOJ could do to me. Nothing. Zilch. Nothing. As long as I did it in Illinois. That's the same thing with the abortion drug. If you're in Wyoming, and there's always going to be a carve out for politicians' kids no matter what, but if you're in Wyoming and you get yourself knocked up, and you decide that you want to go over to California to go get it taken care of, because you're dehumanizing enough. If you want to do this, you've already dehumanized your offspring. But if you want to go over to California and take care of this, there's nothing that the state of Wyoming can do to you. This was the point of overturning Roe, that this would be a states' rights issue, and now we have Texas coming out here and trying to ban this nationwide by overturning the FDA approval. And this, by the way, is what's going to lead to this case going back to the Supreme Court the next time under a more familiar court, or more friendly court, and getting overturned once again and being put back into place. Just so you know, this overreach by Texas, if this doesn't lead to outright civil war, it's going to be this overreach is what's going to lead this back into the courts and get reinstated. You won. If your goal was to end abortion on a government level, except for politicians' kids, of course, because those always have a carve-out, you won this round within your jurisdiction. Now the rest of us in the country have to sit back and take the time and educate people that there are ways to get around this without going and having a child ripped out of your womb. Without having the government involved in it. As far as this goes, I mean, that's between the people of Wyoming and their government. I am afraid that this is going to backfire, and that again is me being completely pragmatic on the issue. Not my rathers. I would rather see no more abortions, but I would rather do it by people being educated and not feeling that they need to go back and have their child violently sucked out of their insides. I would rather people be smarter and put themselves in positions where they never have to have one, except for an extreme emergency, like rape or incest. But we'll see. We'll keep watching this and see where this lands. Alright, and with that being said, the last thing that we do on Tuesday now, since we've shuffled around the end cards, is we look at the rules of acquisition before we head out of here today. From Memory Beta, the most complete source of rules of acquisition that we have. Not all rules of acquisition have been listed in either an alpha or beta canon. So we can't do absolutely everything, but we will do what we can as we go. The rules of acquisition are a Ferengi religion from the fictional race of the Ferengi from the Star Trek franchise, which govern in a hyper-capitalistic society how the Ferengi interact with each other, how they make profit for themselves with other Ferengi, and also with other species around the galaxy. So every Tuesday, we read one of these rules of acquisition. We look at how it affects us in the real world and how it was used in the show or book if possible, or in lore in general. We are down to... yeah, we did the 162nd. Even in the worst of times, someone turns a profit. And we move down to the 168th rule of acquisition, whisper your way to success. Subliminals. One of the fun things about trying to advertise yourself, you can go out. This was something that I saw in real estate, by the way. I did start taking real estate classes. I never finished because the move came up and, I was always working, so I was never able to come back out and finish every single, I wasn't able to finish the source material. I'd like to go back and get my real estate license at some point, but I just don't know when I'm going to do it. But one of the things that I saw, it always seemed to be the more successful retailers, the more successful agents were the ones who got recommendations from friends. Now, as an agent, especially if you got to be successful, you could go out and put your name on a gigantic billboard hanging out over Highway 14. There were 4 separate agents in the Janesville area that had a billboard over Milton Avenue in Janesville, Highway 14, one of the most traveled thoroughfares in the city. But I never saw their signs outside of people's houses. I just saw the big billboard out there. The signs I saw were people who happened to be in the office, answered the phones, and people who got word-of-mouth recommendations, including the few word-of-mouth recommendations that I got. You can be flashy. You can advertise. You can put up fireworks. Get the loudspeaker, get the bullhorn. And that'll work for some people. But you can also go by the 168th rule of acquisition. Whisper your way to success. Do a little humble brag every once in a while. Do your services to the best of your ability. And let your... tell a friend here. It's the same thing like when I start the show. Tell a friend. Tell a few more people to get in here. That's why we do finance at the beginning, so you got some time to go back in and say, hey, I got this really cool news show that's tries to be as objective as possible. Sometimes he fails and sometimes he's biased, but tries to be as objective as possible before we get into the main news story, because I would rather my record and my interactions with you guys be the guide for people to get here than to buy YouTube advertising. And I could go back and buy Twitter Blue and get YouTube advertising and all the other things, or I can say, hey, invite one other person with you for tomorrow. Hey, while we're doing finance, hey, go text somebody and say, hey, you want to check out this news program? Whisper the way to success. And that's what we have for that. We finished. We got done with everything. We don't do that very often around here, especially with big news stories like the Trump arrest and the bank fail. and the Ukraine war, and all the other big episodes that tend to take up the entire episode while other stuff is going on. So yeah, we finished up. That's cool. So we'll be back here. Where's the outro music? I'm gonna throw that up here. Blessed to me by one amazing musician named Stephen Ignoramus. I heard the song once off of his show and I fell in love with it, absolutely. I know he uses it every once in a while too, but this is probably one of my favorite Stephen Ignoramus beats. So with that, we're out of here for the day. Thank you everybody who came by and chatted in the live chat. Everybody who came by and hung out, and the few people that were here, and also all the people who are watching back on the replay as well, because 6 p.m. is a hard time slot to fill. We'll be back here tomorrow to talk more about the news, about the headlines, what's happening in the world. We'll see if we get an arrest tomorrow morning, or if we get protests, or Fed stuff, or any number of things that are going on with that. Plus, we'll see if the banks fail, the Ukraine war takes off, or any other number of things that are boiling up around us, as we watch and see what happens in the next 22 hours. Hope to see you guys here for that. Waiting to see you for more of that. We will be rating somebody on Twitch. If you are over on that platform, stick around. Otherwise, take care. Have a good night. Be safe. Be good. And we'll see you then. And until then, I am Jay Edgar. And this is Contemporary. Take care.